Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to Lincoln University. Welcome to Be-Link Innovation. We're a full business unit of Lincoln University. We try to capitalize on innovation. Today we have a wonderful speaker speaking in our Excellence series. Before we get into the details and the introductions, I will do a little bit of housekeeping, then I will give the floor to Chad Hewitt, and he will be the master of ceremony later on. And you will guys see me back towards the end of this session. Housekeeping. If you want to go to the toilet, that is possible. We actually have those. We go to the end of the room, turn right, and then it's the third door on your right-hand side. We do have emergency exits. The door that you came in through, there's an emergency exit here. You can also leave through those doors. We do not expect any fire drills or emergency drills. So if we hear the alarm, it is the real deal. And luckily, we have a couple of team members here that will help me to bring you out to safety. I have Katie, I have Joe in the background, and I think Tiffany is somewhere else as well. Tiffany's in the back as well. And my name is Wim. After the talk from our speaker, you guys are very much invited for some drinks and nibbles. We will be serving alcoholic beverages. So I just wanted to remind you, and I will do that again after the talk, that we will serve alcoholic beverages. But please remember, when you enjoy those, that you follow once you're home safe. Thank you very much. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Professor Chad Hewitt, our provost.
Thanks, Tim. Good evening. Chad Hewitt, as Tim said, I'm the provost of the university. I've been here since September, so I'm slowly getting to know people around the place. And Kevin reminded me that we actually were in a meeting together at one point in time over the last 9 months. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to the third Lincoln University Excellence Series presentation. Lincoln's a specialist land-based university with a significant contribution to the Lincoln and Selwyn economy, but also to the New Zealand economy. We have a global impact in terms of the work that we do, and the Excellence Series is designed to demonstrate that impact and to allow for the communication of what the research is, how exciting it is, and also the story, the narrative of the people that are behind that research. Our leading edge land-based impactful research has meaningful industry collaborations, global connections, modern learning environments, and internationally recognized academics, as we'll see tonight. The Excellence Series also allows us the opportunity to showcase that leadership in various disciplines across multiple aspects. And we're quite pleased with Professor Kevin Moore's presentation, leading this event, discussing his latest research insights into our well-being and how it's inseparable from our relationship with each other and the wider world. Just a few points, quite a few points that have been highlighted very well for me. Kevin's been at Lincoln University since 1991, and he's been operating both as a teacher, an educator, and a researcher during that time. His areas are tourism, psychology, leisure, and well-being, and I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong and add additional things as they go through. He supervised over 70 postgraduate students, published over 100 peer-reviewed articles with a number of externally funded research programs under his hat. His internationally recognized research outputs include highly cited work on tourist decision-making, experience in premier tourism journals, including the Annals of Tourism Research, Tourism Management, the Journal of Travel Research. Recently, he's published a sole-authored book entitled Wellbeing and Aspirational Culture, associated with Palgrave Macmillan. Kevin's also held a number of associate editor roles, probably too numerous to list, but they have listed a few here, and is currently a behavioral and brain sciences associate, a member of the Royal Society Te Aoraki, and New Zealand Association of Positive Psychology. Kevin's also held a number of leadership roles within the university, including chair of the Human Research Ethics Committee, chair of the Annual Promotions Committee, academic program manager, head of department, deputy divisional director, deputy academic program manager, convener of self-review panels for external program reviews, and membership of the courses committee. Kevin likes committees. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Kevin. We look forward to hearing what you have to tell us. Thank you.
And you're a cover, and yes, you pretty much got it right, so that's all good. And also, Leos Gitunda, which apparently is Old English for hello, and it literally means be healthy, which given that I'm old, I'm English, and I'm talking about well-being, it's probably an appropriate welcome for everybody. And thank you so much, and I hope those at the back will be able to hear me well enough, and hopefully see me as well. So, not that I'm a narcissist. Okay. Now, I assume that we can get right into it. Basically, am I going the wrong way? There we go. Basically, I'll be talking about being a person, the challenging art of well-being in today's world. Being a person is the sort of focus, and I think the originality that I've brought to this area of study, this topic. What I'd like you to leave today with is an understanding of how today we often get well-being presented as very much an individual pursuit. You know, it's something that you get to do privately. You do a bit of mindfulness, a bit of meditation, a bit of physical exercise, those sorts of things. What I want you to leave with today is an appreciation that well-being, even at that personal level, is intimately connected with everything else around you in your life. That's other people, it's the environment, it's the economy, it's the society, it's the culture. And those things basically generate what I would say you, as well as your well-being through time. And that's essentially what I wanted to get across. Unfortunately for you, I've enjoyed putting this presentation together, which means it's probably a little bit long, and it's probably also going into rabbit holes that I shouldn't go into. But there we go. This is my Okay, and I also like to enjoy myself. Okay, being a person, let's begin with that. I'll do a few sort of preliminary scene setting comments, and then we'll get into it proper systematically and very, very academically. Being a person, social psychologists often talk about the two tasks that we have as people. One is to get along, and one is to get ahead. Now, I don't like the framing of that. I don't like that, competitive aspect to it. So I call it fitting in and standing out. Being outstanding in your field, as it were. And one thing that I want to sort of emphasize is that being a person is really about standing out. In other words, it's being the unique person you are and differentiating yourself from others. But here's the catch, others people too. And we often forget the fact that in our desire to be unique and individual, that we are also not completely unique. We share all sorts of things, including opportunities for well-being, experiencing well-being. So one of the things that I ask myself about becoming a person or being a person is how do we learn to stand out? Because, we're all born, small and naked into this world. How do we come to understand ourselves as unique individuals? Well, there's one ready source of information about that. It's called our culture. Our culture has an understanding of what a person is, an understanding of what it takes to be a member of that culture, that society. Somebody trying to get in, get out.
No, it's the Cold War. Another 2 years and we don't have it anymore.
Excellent. Okay. Right, so being a person is about being an individual. That's essentially the point I want to make. But it's being an individual within the context of cultural expectation about what it is to be a person. Okay, well, everybody at the moment is talking about happiness. I have actually physically put this was supposedly a very fancy animation. It doesn't take long to collect these sorts of photos around the place. This is actually a collection which spans the globe because I took some of these when I was on study leave over in places like Leicester, over in the UK, etc. But also close to home, Tekriti's subdivision. Welcome to the good life. Their happyology, apparently. There are building sites which promise that you will flourish and thrive in this space, in your space, indeed. So, and there's also happiness and other survival techniques, books on mindfulness everywhere we go. So essentially, we're surrounded by it. There's a lot of talk. Now, why is there a lot of talk about it? Well, there's two possibilities. Well, there's probably more than two, but here's two. Firstly, some people argue we've got it so good that all that's left is just to be concerned about our well-being. Okay? Life is excellent. And there's actually a name for these people, they're self-titled new optimists, although I tried to find their website recently and couldn't find it, so it may have disappeared. I don't know what that says about the world. The new optimists who argue essentially that things have been getting better all the time. We're at the point where things have never been better for human beings, for people. And one of the most prominent writers in that field, Stephen Pinker, you could read the books. I always have skeptical a lot of things, but certainly packed with facts and the like. That's one possibility. There's another possibility, however, and it's one which I tend to go along with. We often talk about things that we lack. We talk about community. We talk about well-being. We talk about all sorts of things which are issues for us. They're issues because one way or other we lack them. Why, if I argue this, why might we lack well-being given this is the modern world? Okay, well, here's a quote from a book called Pursuit of Unhappiness by Daniel Payton, a philosopher of, it's called credential philosophy actually, but philosopher of well-being. And it reminds me of my zoological course. That was my first degree, zoology. My second was psychology. Sorry, I could probably put a little bit of context around my thinking. For most of the living world, a good life is mainly a matter of context. Given the right setting and a good dose of luck, most organisms tend to do well, or at least to succeed in their terms. That's basically how they're wired. Selected if you go to the evolutionary explanation. Conversely, put a typical creature in the wrong setting, good luck or no, it's lost, pretty much guaranteed quick death. Now, of course, I'm not talking about quick deaths, although death does come into it. But people, I would argue, are in the wrong context. The wrong context for being a person. Well, and I'm going to repeat things wrong. I'm going to focus mostly on how we understand ourselves, but also there's been arguments that our world took a misstep. And it took a misstep when it moved into a very, sort of complicated form of social existence. And I hesitate to click on this particular link, but I will. These authors, John Gowdy and Lisi Crawl, argue that essentially we're an ultra-social species. Fancy word, basically means we're particularly complicated in our social life. We followed a certain kind of social existence. Ultra-sociality is also what termites or certain kinds of termites and ants pursue, particularly those which harm fungi. And they can transform their environment. So before you read the quotes that will be revealed, if I realise the audience I'm talking to, here we have some termites, and here we have transformation of the environment. termites evolved their ultrasociality biologically. So there are different members of that, the species which do this, different members of it will have particularly well-formed, evolved mandibles for chopping up leaves and that, which they then feed to the fungi. And they have morphological differentiation because of biological evolution. They've been designed through evolution for their roles. Humans also have become ultrasocial, but through a different path. They become ultrasocial through cultural evolution. Now, as I say, these authors argue that this was a particularly important step, particularly if we understand, impacts on environments and the like, but also impacts on well-being. Humans could not have anticipated where agriculture would lead them to hierarchy, regimentation of productive life, ecological degradation, etc. Just about every sin you can imagine, which I think is a little bit hard, but here we go. What I'm interested in is that it also, because it's a culturally evolved process, essentially it means that individuals are recruited for the purposes of that productive system. And they're recruited into hierarchies which are organised to maintain that productive system, to ensure that more and more food production can happen, essentially. And there's a general decline in the well-being of the average person. And sadly, the anthropological evidence, the bone evidence seems to support this. Reduction in stature, increase in infectious diseases in the bones, wear and tear on skeletons, etc. Okay, well, enough of that, because actually I want to focus on this, how we understand ourselves. Now, I'm jumping here, but we're making an assumption. I think most people today understand themselves pretty much as a container full of psychological stuff. You have desires, you have ideas, you have values, you have perceptions, you have all of these things, and somehow or other they're stuffed inside of you, probably in that incredibly complex organ called the brain. That is most people's, I think, intuitive understanding of who they are and what gives them unity, what gives them themselves, okay? And one of the reasons we hold to that is because the alternative seems horrific. The alternative is that we're empty-headed, strange, almost mechanical beasts like zombies. We have no mind, we have no interior life, we have no sensitivities, feelings, emotions, all those things that matter so much to us. We are just, following all sorts of, I don't know, what zombies follow, to be honest. Well, what I want to propose is that there is another option, a third option. You can't say alternative, that's about two. A third option, and I hope we get the chemists back on board here with this picture. If you remember nothing about this lecture, remember this slide. This is, if you've been to school and you ever produced nylon in school, chemistry, excellent. Basically, I thought it was magic. You have it. And I don't know what these chemicals are. Apparently one of them is quite aqueous. But anyway, you have a beaker and it has two lots of liquid which don't mix, but they have a boundary. And out that boundary, if you hook in something, start to wind up, you get this thread. You get this emerging thread, and as long as you're winding at a nice steady rate, at the right rate, it will keep on coming. It will keep on happening. It will flow. That's what I think we are. And those layers are essentially our biology, our culture. Where they come together, we form. That's who we are as persons. And it's a process. It's a process. It takes time. We are wound out. Some of us get wound up, but so please remember that. So I'm going to return to that. I'm probably going to into it reasonably quickly. Okay, so that was the preliminary remarks. I want to get a little bit more serious now and talk about well-being in today's world. And I called it a paradox wrapped in an enigma. Here's a clock which wakes us up, but it's been put to sleep. Okay. Now, I talk about the new optimists. Well, here's a very classic statement of how things were before society, before civilization. No arts, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear, danger, and violent death. And the life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. I'm sure many of you have heard that, Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan. Well, since then, things seem to have got better. Or at least, if we accept his rendition of the natural state. Life expectancy, this is fascinating graph. It's the entire world population, and it's at 3 different points in time: 1800, 1950, 2012. 1800 life expectancy, say in India, it was around about 25. It had become around about 35 by 1950 and has skyrocketed to about 67 in 2012 and have increased since. And it's the same everywhere. Remarkable life expectancy. And here's the classic graph, which many of you will be familiar with, I think. Poverty. It's 2 lines here. First is percentage of the world's population estimated to be living $2 a day. Bottom line, percentage of the world's population estimated to be living on $1 a day. Now, and this World Bank data bringing us more up to date. And it's used by people like Stephen Pinker to demonstrate massive reductions in poverty. There are, however, a few fiddles in there. If you use other indexes like the basic needs development index or poverty index, you'll find quite a different picture. So you may have heard of hundreds of millions being lifted out of poverty in China. By these measures, definitely. By the NPI, actually poverty increased. Access to basic needs, land, to common goods, those sorts of things. Okay, but nevertheless, it's a pretty impressive. Here's recent data from the World Happiness Report 2022, which is the 10th anniversary report, based on a Gallup poll which goes all the way back to 2005. And this is life evaluation, the chemical ladder. Basically, what's your best life? Give it a 10. What's your worst life? Give it a 0. And this is across the globe. Just about every nation is included in this survey. And over time, from 2005 to 2021, this is the trend. It's a little bit hard to judge, but the population-weighted overall trends. So in other words, if everybody in India says 5, or the average is 5, 1.45 billion people, that gets weighted into the estimate. Bit erratic because of what happens in those very populous countries. The green line is where you take the 5 top of the most populous countries out, and that's what you level it. If anything, a little bit of a decline, maybe just static, who knows? Well, at the same time, things which you think would improve that life evaluation have been going up. So the red line is freedom, perceptions of freedom going up significantly, by the way. Perceptions of corruption going down, that's the green line, and perceptions of social support staying pretty much steady. So things have either been steady or improving. But life evaluation globally has either been static or slightly declining. GDP and healthy life expectancy going up as well. Positive affect and negative affect. Affect is the term that psychologists talk about our emotional experience. So positive emotional experience essentially made up of 3 scores. The middle line, the solid line, is positive affect. The opposite score, pretty much flat one, or at least it stayed at quite a high level. So, a bit more laughter, a bit less enjoyment. Negative affect, it's gone up. And it's gone up in total as a composite. Interestingly, stress is not part of the negative affect score. Stress is followed the green line. It's globally, remember. This is negative affect, the blue line. The dotted the green line is worry. The dotted red line is sadness. Interestingly, anger stays pretty much the same. It might surprise many people. Here we go. Okay, let's bring it home. Up here, in 1972, the youth suicide rate was lower than any other age group. By 1992, it was higher than any other age group. Something happened. I'm going to focus on young people for all sorts of reasons, a lot of people leave. but partly because these are people becoming members of our society, becoming people, persons in our world. Here's a graph which always disturbs me and disturbs, I think, the students I show it to. This is essentially a World Health Organization report in 2017, teenage suicides. And this is one area we do not want to punch it our way, but we do. Odd, really odd. Well, it strikes me, New Zealanders, as odd. And we're looking at the blue thing for the most recent, that was back 2015. It's more or less bounced around at that level in terms of relative to other countries. We're in the top 2 or 3 on this measure. So it's not good. And more disturbing still, there are 2 little diamonds here at 1990 and 2000. So it went up. Okay. And as Michelle Sharp, UNICEF, our New Zealand CEO, said, 2021, something around 21% of adolescent boys and girls aged 10 to 19 live with a mental disorder. Wow. Here's some details on that from the Youth 2000 surveys. There's been 3 of them, 2001, 2012, 2019. In 2019, these are the rates of these sorts of things. Prevalence of deliberate self-harm, 24.1, that always gets me because that's deliberate. 1 in 4. High levels of anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and suicide. Looking in more detail at some of those, the changes, the trends. I've highlighted in red where it's gone down, highlighted in green where it's gone up. The takeaway, well-being's gone down, and of course, things such as depressive symptoms, thoughts of suicide have gone up. And this is the curious thing for me. Once again, all the red columns are basically where it's decreased. The things we would expect to be associated, the behaviours we would expect to be associated with ill-being have actually improved. There is less consensual sexual intercourse, which apparently we don't want adolescents to participate in. There is also actually, of those who still do participate in it, less use of condoms, which is good to see. But cigarette use, marijuana use, binge drinking, dangerous driving, all gone down and gone down significantly. But well-being has also gone down. What's going on? And I can tell you also, I haven't got it here, but things such as feelings of safety in the neighbourhood, safety at school, they've improved. More young people say they feel safe in their neighbourhood at school. Fewer say that they have seen an adult physically attack another adult. They've improved, but their well-being's gone down. What is going on? Well, I think what's going on is that we have a particular view of ourselves, and that view of ourselves is causing problems. And that is what I call modern notion of the self, and it's going to be a little bit of philosophy. The self, what is it? Well, we might think the self is something psychological inside of us. I want to argue, no, it's not. It's something historical, it's something cultural, it's something which has changed over time, and we know it has. Our understanding of what the self is, it's historical, right? It has a historical rather than a natural status. It's good, Danziger argues. A historian, psychology and the self, psychologist the self. What is it? Well, it's the empiricist self. It's the idea that we can understand ourselves and the self in the same way we understand anything in the world, through observation, through measurement, etc. And of course, psychology needed this view of self to come about before we could get going as a discipline. It was a shift in time from the soul to an empirically knowable self. And this provided us with our sense of unity, our sense of individuality, our sense of being a unique person. A little bit of philosophy. Essentially, remarkably, this could probably be, certainly in terms of its articulation, it can be pinpointed to one particular piece of work by John Locke, a famous philosopher. The point that I want to make of this is that, in essence, he privatized the self. It became an interior thing. And it was something also that we could examine and we could control ourselves. continuity came from consciousness of this self. Now, all of this might sound a little bit iffy. What's that all about? Well, basically, it's the kind of notion of self that I think we're all familiar with. It's the idea that it's private to us. In fact, it's private to the centurion. Only I can really see it. Only I can really know it. It's observable through introspection. It involves process of self-monitoring. Because I can see it, I look at it, I see how it's going, I monitor it. And technologies itself, we're helped along by that by things such as, well, back in the John Locke's day, things like having a diary, reflecting on your thoughts, reflecting on your feelings, morning pages today. I don't know how many people here do morning pages. My wife does it, it's great. But it involves self-monitoring. It teaches you how to see yourself as something private within. And it's motivational. It basically says we maximize our self-interest. Because with this self, we know we want to affect it, improve it, make it better. Okay, very quickly. Adam Smith, Theory of Moral Sentiments. If you don't know Adam Smith, you obviously haven't done much economics, because his book, Wealth of Nation, is all about the first articulation of the market. But his earlier work, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, was about just that. Sympathy in particular, how we understand ourselves and each other, and therefore we can trade and we can transact with each other. And the subtitle of it is really revealing. Apparently statues get toppled a lot these days, so you know. An analysis of the principles by which men naturally judge concerning the conduct and character, first of their neighbours and afterwards of themselves. That's an important subtitle. First of their neighbours. We learn about us seeing ourselves as separate by first understanding others as selves, if you like, as people. So we basically get a mirror view of what we are by looking at others. And this goes with social science. You know, if you are a social scientist, you'll know about George Herbert Mead's generalised other. You'll know about looking glass self and Cooley. Okay. Self-monitoring and self-control actually seems to work in our society. The best predictor of health, wealth, and public safety as an adult is childhood self-control. And there's a gradient effect here. In other words, the more self-control you exhibit as a child, the greater your success as an adult in terms of health, wealth, public safety. But there's a downside. Perfectionism. Correlate of suicidal ideation is well known as that, and suicidal attempts. There was a meta-analysis in 2017 which basically looked at 164 studies, samples of about 40,000 college students, once again young people, US, UK, Canada, 1989 to 2016, and what happened? Were there any changes? Were there any changes? Well, indeed there were. 3 types of perfectionism: self-oriented perfectionism, I want to be perfect, and went up. Not surprising. What went up more was other-oriented perfectionism. If you've ever been driving behind somebody slow and then doesn't indicate and turns left, what a fool. Why can't they drive properly? What's wrong with them? We want others to be perfect. That's what happened. So has, and most radically, socially perceived perfectionism. The idea that other people expect me to be perfect. Okay. The downside, of course, is always something. But there's an upside, and it doesn't need to worry about this. I haven't read Jane Eyre myself. Oopsie days. I haven't read Jane Eyre myself, but apparently this was the first novel in which this understanding of the self really gets its full expression. Jane does not gently comment. She defiantly questions, she's a critical. She asks for such an answer as to convince her own intellect, satisfy her own heart's deepest desire. Wanting a work chance, so she stands apart, demanding. This is a new attitude in the novel. Yes, it is, and it's the expression of it. And it was also, it's the expression of people who resist the social order. She was a woman, but from herself and her own resources, she could challenge that system. So it has a positive cast to it as well. Okay. I promise you the last 3, 4, 5 and 6 are quite short. Okay. Now, that view of the self ran into problems almost immediately. Basically, you know, David Hume, another philosopher, there's all these philosophers around. If you've ever thought about what the eye can see, the one thing it can't see is the eye. Okay? It's the limit. Now, the self, when we look inside, is much the same. We are the observer of all the things inside ourselves, but, you know, we can't see ourselves, and David Hume pointed that out. So, hard to locate through introspection, actually. Authentic selves. I'm going to make a little bit of a point about this because I think there is a definite experience we all have of not living who we actually are. So, who are we actually? Is there very deep down inside myself, me, authentic self, which can't get expression in the world? Well, it turns out, all sorts of clever little experiments, it probably doesn't exist in that sense as some psychological entity within us. Interestingly, people talk about feeling more authentic when they actually conform to cultural norms of goodness, to deep values in their culture. Why? We tend to think that it's only when we, you know, look quite different from cultural norms that we're expressing our true self. People report feeling authentic when they're in line with it. It's connected also to self-enhancement, apparently, recent studies. But I want to focus on the fact it's connected to a sense of fluidity. In other words, living life in a way that is smooth, natural, spontaneous, whatever you want to call it. That feels true. It feels like you're really being who you are. Okay. Now, that contrasts, as I say, with the sense we typically have of who the person is. The person is who everybody else sees. It's not really me. The person is, if you focus on the middle thing here, social world, imposes itself on me, makes me act in ways I don't want to act. But I have to do it if I need to, you know, get a wage or a salary. I have to do all sorts of things, you know, not to be my social group, whatever. And certainly in psychology, Jung's persona is this idea of a mask. Persona comes from the Greek theatre, the mask that he would put on. And that excludes all sorts of aspects of me, my shadow. So psychology has this real aspect of seeing the person as an imposition on the real self. And self-determination theory, I won't go there, but it also argues that same. Oh, I'm going to go there anyway. Basically, it's a theory of motivation, but also of well-being, you like. And a lot of words there. Basically, what it means is that each of us experiences internal conflict. You know, we feel we should do X, but we really want to do Y. Right? And that's not really us. Doing X isn't really us. I have to do it for all sorts of reasons. That's not really me. So myself, my true self, is different from the person. But it's inside of me, it's internal to who I am, but in a sense, I don't endorse it. So it's very right at the heart of a theory which is quite dominant in well-being circles. Okay, now, it's taken quite a bit longer than I expected, but yeah. Is the mind flat? What's that mean? Well, remember the nylon. We are constantly being wound off, if you like, of life, out of life. Turns out, according to Nick Chater, at any rate, the mind is indeed flat. It is not deep. We make ourselves up as we go along in life. Essentially, you know, there are clever experiments showing how a computer screen which has a, you know, Microsoft Word document, which is all X's except for the place where you're looking, crack your eyes. As soon as you look somewhere else, we turn that X into a letter as well. And you report, you see a full screen of text. It's not there. You're making it up as you go along. Your eyes are moving very rapidly, reassuring you that you see. And the same goes for a coloured multicolored perception that you have. You think you look out, and everything's there and it's all at the same time, it's all colour. No, it's not. Simple experiments, which we do in Site 101. Bringing coloured material into peripheral vision, you can't identify colour. Most of your vision is black and white. Doesn't feel that way. Same goes everything. We make up our, or at least this is what chimed claims. We make it up as we go along. It's an improvised mind. That drawing is what he called, is what we call an impossible object. If you follow it, it doesn't kind of work. It couldn't be actually in the real world. If you follow, the blocks and how they're arranged, he calls the mind an impossible object. We exist, however, and this is the point I want to make. We exist, and we exist in time, not in this psychic space that we imagine, the container full of psychological stuff. Okay. Right. So there's evidence that the notion of self we have probably isn't really right. Okay, so what's the alternative? Well, it's the nylon. It's the person. And there's 3 books that demonstrate, I think, a very quick view of what we are. First is by Peter Strawson, a philosopher who basically wrote about this concept of person. It's logically prior. It comes first. And the concept of person is not to be analysed as that of an animated body, sort of moving around in a reductionist and materialist sense. No mind, no purpose, no nothing, a zombie, or of an embodied anima. In other words, something like this mind, a psyche, a soul, ego inhabiting a body, and operating the body. Both of those, he said, fail because they all depend upon the notion of a person. Okay, so what is a person? Well, it's pretty familiar, really. Person is an identifiable, you're all people. You've got a name. You've got a biography, a history. You're identifiable, you're embodied, you're sitting there, I can see you're embodied. You're an individual human, you have being, you exist. I'm not saying you don't exist, which is what the zombie is. Self-understanding, you have that as well. You have an understanding of who you are and what you're like. And you have agentive capability. You're an agent. You can do things according to a purpose you want to achieve. That's what a person is. And Jack Martin, who was one of the authors of that book, I'm working with him, trying to get a project going, looking at how people, persons, manage their well-being in everyday life. Finally, and this is the last technical bit, from Ron Hare, the late Ron Hare, of Hare Family Fame, up in Auckland. Lila, Nikki Hare, all those. He examined my PhD as well. 70 years an academic, professor of philosophy at Oxford, much of that. He said the fundamental human experience or reality is a conversation. And it's in that conversation that we're born into and that we contribute to, that we develop our sense of who we are, our theory of ourselves as a person, based on our culture's understanding of what a person is. And it provides us with the unity, the continuity that we seek and that we sought from the idea that we have this self within us, which provides that unity, the lock view. Continuity of consciousness, action and agency. I'll mention that because this is why we're moral beings. What we did yesterday, we're accountable for, believe me. And that action is accountable, we're responsible for it, we're held responsible because, we've got an identifiable body and we will be located. And it provides us with a social continuity as well. The moral order, the local moral order matters deeply in relation to actions and the agency we express. And it might be why, when we're doing good, we feel authentic. Okay. How's the thread wound? Well, this is where I get to the real meat, the end point in a sense. The balancing act, the challenging art of well-being today, is that we have to basically balance continuity with disruption. If you think about winding out that nylon, You don't want it to be too disruptive, otherwise magic stops. It ceases. Animals and plants, evolution itself is all about trying to maintain some kind of smooth continuity. Live, continue to live. Social coordination, cooperation, well-being. Now we talk about the experience of flow. I don't know how many here have heard of that expression, flow, and experienced it. Well, flow is like this beautiful experience of where self-consciousness disappears, for a start, interesting. Action and awareness merge. You feel like you are part of the world of action that you are involved in. If you're climbing a rock, if you're riding those motorcycles very fast around tracks, whatever it might be, you are in the flow. It's continuity of action. Things can get disrupted. I won't go into this in detail. Often we have the skills to deal with those disruptions. And a metaphor we can use here is that every culture provides a certain number of tasks we have to achieve, be a person in that culture. And it also should provide us with the tools to manage those tasks in a way that gives us a sense of a flow of action, a sense of fluency, a sense of being who we are. It's a tool task metaphor. It comes from Whare, and it's the idea that, it's a bit like, about flow skills, meeting challenges. If you're a person who plays tennis, you want to play somebody who's just a little bit better than yourself. Your skills are matched to the challenge. These tools we have, which include neurology, by the way, and how that develops over time, it includes, of course, the things that we've learned, the skills we've learned, critical thinking we've learned, but it also involves resources beyond ourselves. It involves the environment. It involves economic resources. It involves all of these aspects of our social and cultural world that help us basically carry out the continuity of action which comprises a human personal life. Okay, how do we help people gain this continuity of action? Well, there are iframe solutions, and here Nick Schaefer appears again, preprint in the Behavioural Brain Sciences, leading journal in the behavioural sciences. Iframe solutions at the level of the individual. And this is where, I'm afraid, picture which showed a meditating woman. I haven't talked a lot about meditation. I haven't talked a lot about mindfulness. I haven't talked a lot about gratitude and all sorts of things you can do at the level of the individual to improve your well-being, and they work. That's iframe solutions, but these authors argue that behavioural scientists have focused on iframe solutions at the, knowing that they're not particularly effective, at the expense of S-frame solutions at the level of the system. And of course, this could be, it's a lot of big iframe solutions. You can meditate, you can learn, you can run. S-frame solutions, you can tax, you can have laws and regulations, you can perhaps even have revised educational systems, or you can educate. So those are the sorts of things we need by O-frame and S-frame. S-frame solutions tend to work best. He was looking at things such as trying to change people's behaviour in relation to climate change, trying to change people's behaviour in relation to obesity, trying to change behaviour change across really important social issues. We know what works and we know what doesn't. Well, it works to an extent, but not, sort of a solution, a full solution to the problem are iframe solutions. Problem is, people who institute iframe solutions tend to resist F-frame solutions. Because they have, well, it works for me. You can't get everybody doing this. It'll be fine. And then I've got all the $64,000 question capital S-frame solutions, transformation of the system. I won't go there, I'm just a psychologist. Okay, a little bit about 3 slides away, your tolerance. A lot of the things, such as gratitude interventions and the like that you may have heard about, they are thoroughly evidence-based. They come from randomized controlled trials, they work. In other words, if you do X, gratitude, journaling, whatever, then your well-being will improve. I'm interested in the F. I set my students a task in Psych 302. social psychological wellbeing, where I ask them to do a personal intervention in their own lives. Then I get them to report on it. And one of the things I ask them to think about and record is what were the problems you had in doing it. Believe me, there are a lot of problems. And typically, I have to say, it's assessment and those sorts of things. And so they can't go to the gym as regularly as they can. They can't do all of these things in their own lives because it just doesn't seem to work. How do people get well-being in the flux of their life? How can we study those attempts? Well, this is where we have life position analysis, something that Jack Martin and I are trying to work through, basically trying to see how persons dealing with their lives, basically getting detailed biographical data of them, interviewing them, etc., how to identify the positions they take. And what do we mean by positions? Well, things such as at micro level, you know, when children are playing with each other, one, you know, gives a toy to the other, or takes a toy, and they take different positions in that exchange. Okay? And we learn through that what George Herbert Mead calls sociality. We learn what it is like to be on the other side of that. So, but at the macro level, there's also, of course, winners and losers. There are controllers and controlled. There are insiders and outsiders. There are givers and takers. And the interpersonal level of those positions is happening within a bigger context of social positions. That's why what happens, whether it's economically, whether it's in terms of access to the outdoors, whether it's in terms of you know, cultural opportunities or whatever, some people are on one side of the transaction, some people are on the other. And it's good to be on both sides just to empathise for a start, but in your life, as you work through life and the kinds of things it throws at you, the better skills you have at operating in relation to those positions, the better things will be. The tools you will have, the better. But of course, often that's not the case. Often we don't have those. So what's the takeaway? This is the end. I'd argue that the well-being we're interested in is actually the interest of us, and that's a pronoun. It's the well-being of persons. It's not the well-being of cells. It's not the well-being of bodies. It's not the well-being of etc. etc. Person is fundamentally put together as the nylon by the environment and by the conditions. Once those conditions are right, you can wind off a life as a person. Persons and their experiences are continuous product of the conditions of the world. You have to be concerned about the world. You can't just, you know, lock yourself away and meditate. Well, you can. I wouldn't want to, but the conditions of the world are where your well-being is being formed. And the task of improving well-being is therefore not a personal one, although certainly act personally, a collective task. And I think it's got an optimistic view, to be honest, because this works both ways. We are constituted by the world, but we also constitute the world. You know, and so when we, you know, are better, when we have better well-being, it flows outwards as well. Well, thank you. I don't know what the old English thank you is, but here we go.
Well, we have time for one question. So I'll invite a question from the audience. Again. No, well, I'll ask a question. I think you want to. Yep. Oh, well, I couldn't not know that you really mentioned the word politics or feeling. Because that last statement there seems to be about how we influence or develop a sustainable political system that will generate well-being and society.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite a political beast, but I also have my professional papers. Yes, I think if we're talking Australian solution, we're talking, you know, about a transdisciplinary approach. You really, you know, politics is where we affect our solutions. Is at one level. And so, yes, I haven't talked about politics. A lot of the philosophers society talk a lot about politics. And there was one quote which I didn't replicate there, but I didn't mention. We basically saying that noting the self that John Locke presented is absolutely essential to his political view that we are essentially an aggregate of individuals. Because we have to, each individual has to self-govern.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, and please join me in thanking Kevin once more.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you very much for coming here. On farm mobility, for people that are interested in this same space, the 25th of March. The next event is farm integration for climate change. Again, in this space and more. Oh, sorry. Our next excellent series as well. We're very invited there. We'll have Professor Graham talk about housing opportunities. But that's not now, because now you're actually invited to join us for drinks and nibbles and ask all the questions that you now want to ask Kevin. Please join us to come to the kitchen, food and drinks, and I promise that I would remind you, Fano wants you home safely. So enjoy, but be safe. Thank you very much.